That enum constants are singleton values. There's only one ever instance of country.germany, right? And sealed class subtypes can have multiple instances with different data. So you can have many different circle objects with different radii. And now I just want you to take a look at what I am doing and try to do it yourself. And later on in further this course we will see about our two topics, which are singleton, visibility modifiers and generics, that most of the professional developers use constantly in their Android objects, right? So you just write code with me in your code editor, okay? So keep writing code. Alright, so now let's talk about singleton objects. So what if you have a classes where there should only ever be one instance? That's called a singleton, and in Kotlin it's done with the object keyword. So if I tell you about one thing, we have object here, object fixed size, square and shape, and instead of class we use object. This does two things simultaneously. It defines the class, and second, it creates the single class instance of it. So you never say fixed size square to construct it. You just use fixed size square directly. Since it implements shape, we override area and circumference. So this square has fixed dimensions, side length 4, so area is 4 into 4 16, and circumference is 4 into 4 16, 4 square 16, right? And fixed size square dot area, so we access it like a class name, not a variable, because there's only one fixed size square and it already exists. And if you put this code, you write this code in your IntelliJ code editor, and when you run it, it will show that area is 16.0 and circumference will also be 16.0. So the object is also commonly used for what are called utility objects, instead of grouping related functions together without needing to create instances, like a math utils object that contains helper math application, or a logger object that for logging messages throughout your app. Anywhere you had use a static class in Java, you had use object in Kotlin, if you just know Java a bit. And I also want to talk about visibility modifiers, because these are concepts beginners usually underestimate at first until they start building larger projects, because once your code base grows, you will suddenly realize that wait, Why are multiple objects being created, and why can't this class access stuff it shouldn't? That's exactly what these concepts help solve us, right? So this is exactly what we are going to solve today, and more importantly, when and why to use these things, because syntax without understanding is useless long term. So let's get into it. So what is a singleton? A simple definition if I have to give is that a singleton is a class that can only have one instance. That's it. Only one object exists for the entire application. So why would we want that? That is a good question, but because sometimes multiple instances make absolutely no sense. And if I have to give a real world analogy, think of it that's a government of a country. You don't want 15 separate prime ministers, 42 central governments, and random duplicate authorities. You just want one centralized shared instance, same idea in software. Like if I have to give an example in apps, something should only exist once, like only once, because for example you can say that database manager, setting manager, authentication manager, app analytics tracker, app configuration, logger. Having duplicates would create chaos, and a problem without singleton is that imagine creating two separate database manager, right? And each might open different connections, store different states, conflict with each other, waste memory. That is a terrible architecture. So singleton solves this problem of ours. Singleton just guarantees one thing, that one shared object will be everywhere. That is the rule of singleton, and that is very important. You should follow it. And also under the hood, Kotlin essentially creates single globally accessible object that is stored in memory once. That instance lived lives throughout the app lifecycle. And why this is powerful? Because now every part of application shares same state. Like for example, if I have to give current logged in user should usually be centralized, not duplicated randomly. Imagine an authentication singleton auth manager. Every screen checks custom same authentication state. If login changes, whole app sees same updated state. That's why consistency matters heavily. And obviously singletons are global state, because it is a global shared state, and global state can become dangerous if it's abused, right? Because any part of app can potentially modify it, and that can create hidden bug, unpredictable behavior, debugging nightmares, tight coupling, right? And beginners often turn everything into singleton. It is a very bad idea. Not until and unless every class should be globally shared. And most of the good singleton use cases are best for configuration, logging, analytics, caches, and app-wide managers, statelet utilities. And also I just want you to know that singletons are terrible and most bad for user specific temporary data and random business logic, screen state, objects needing multiple versions. And overusing singletons creates messy architecture fast. And now in a short note, visibility modifiers, because visibility modifiers, this is all about controlling access to code, and it is very important for clean architecture. The core problem is that without visibility control, any part of program could touch anything. That is total chaos. Imagine if every employee in company had access to payroll, admin permissions, app private record, database access. That would be a disaster, right? And software needs boundaries too. So visibility modifiers define boundaries. They control who can access what. This is foundation of encapsulation. That is a huge principle similar to polymorphism. But encapsulation means that hide internal implementation details and expose only what's necessary. That is very important in professional development, because why this matters is good encapsulation prevents misuse, reduces bugs, protects state, simplifies APIs, and improves maintainability. And of course, Kotlin visibility modifiers, there are four main types of modifiers: public, private, and internal, and also protected. So let's break this down in a short note carefully. So what public is, that default visibility, it is a default visibility that can be accessible from everywhere. You don't need specific modifier for this. And then we have private. It is an important modifier that can be accessible only inside from the same class or file, and this creates strong protection. That's it. And then we have a protected. Protected means that something is accessible in class and subclass, and that is very inheritance focused modifier. This exists because sometimes subclasses legitimately need access, but outside world should not. And honestly, these concepts become way more important as projects grow, right? That's why strong developers think about ownership, access, boundary, shared state, architecture, safety. Not just does the code run. You barely notice architecture problem, but in large application you will. So that's it for this video. So now, what's up everyone? Welcome back. Today we are covering the final major concept of this course, and honestly, this is one of the concepts that separates beginner programmers from developer who actually understand how modern libraries and frameworks are designed. Today we are going to talk about generics. And this concept ties together functions, collections, lambdas, classes, reusable architecture, type safety, all of it. And because generics solve one massive programming problem, which is code duplication, and once you understand